Welcome to In24 Headline News. I'm Vicky A. Lee with Internet News. Thanks for joining us in the heart of it today. Coming up next, we have fatal fires during the Texas snowstorm, budesonide, a cheap and readily available potential COVID-19 remedy, and a 117-year-old nun who survived COVID in just 3 weeks. All this and more on today's episode of Headline News. Let's begin by diving right into our news pulse. The University of Zurich has found that social female giraffes that spend time with other giraffes live longer than the more reclusive ones, spending most of their time alone. 1/3 of the global freshwater fish population is in catastrophic decline and in danger of extinction, according to a report. The situation is threatening the health, food security, and livelihood of millions of people around the world. 80 freshwater species have already been declared extinct, including 16 that went extinct in 2020. Since January 16, at least 19 people in India have died after receiving Covaxin and Covishield vaccines, some even dying within a few hours of receiving the shot. The Indian government, however, has denied any connection between the vaccines and the deaths. The Dutch government was asked to reverse its COVID-19 curfew after the Hague court ruled that the curfew infringes on its citizens' rights and has no legal grounds. In her fight for workers' rights amid the new agri-marketing laws in New Delhi, India, Nodeep Kaur has allegedly faced violent custodial torture upon her arrest. 117-year-old French nun Sister André has survived COVID-19 in 3 weeks. The oldest person in Europe said she didn't even realize she was infected. While it's not clear which COVID-19 test she took, many experts have expressed doubt about the efficacy of tests like the PCR. Nottingham Forest FC's star striker Lyle Taylor says he will no longer take a knee before soccer matches, alleging that the Black Lives Matter movement is, quote, Marxist. Florida Palm Beach County Sheriff showed up at a woman's house after she joked on Facebook about dumping masks on a county administrator's office lawn. Thanks to an international team of scientists, you can now watch 1 billion years of tectonic plate movements in a brief 40-second video. Coming up soon, we have our very own Editor-in-Chief Thomas Nijens joining us for a lively discussion on today's top stories. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about some inexpensive alternative treatments to COVID-19, maybe bringing it back to my traditional Chinese medicine practice.
It would be great to hear your insight. Thank you very much. But first, let's take a look at the top news of the week. A mother of 4 from southwestern Ontario was shocked when the Ontario Provincial Police fined her $880 for failing to comply with a stay-at-home order. Natasha Cole, the mother in question, contended that she merely picked up her children from their grandparents' house, something that should be allowed under the Reopening Ontario Act. Cole was adamant that she did not breach the rules and may have even been a victim of racial profiling. She intends to fight the charge and fine with pro bono assistance from the local legal community. Parents across the province will be watching closely to see what is and isn't allowed. A study from the University of Oxford found that budesonide, a drug typically used to treat asthma, appeared to greatly reduce the need for urgent care and hospitalization in COVID patients. Adults in early stages of infection were given a budesonide inhaler. There were quicker resolutions of fever and self-reported symptoms in participants. According to the study, serious side effects are rare and budesonide is fairly cheap and safe. A budesonide inhaler can be even prescribed to those as young as 5 years of age. Budesonide joins the list of treatments that studies have found to be effective in mitigating COVID symptoms. Ensuring adequate levels of vitamin D is another effective way to boost immune function. After all, budesonide is a steroid and vitamin D acts like a steroid in the body. To read a previous story on vitamin D and its effects on COVID-19, head to in24.ca and enter wiki production code A0628. A Manhattan judge ruled that an excerpt from a 2016 deposition by Ghislaine Maxwell can be unsealed despite Maxwell's attempt to hide it from the public. The English socialite is best known for her affiliation with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell was arrested in July 2020 on charges related to Epstein's sex trafficking operation. District Judge Loretta Preska denied her attempt to keep the excerpt confidential, stating that Maxwell had a, quote, minimal privacy interest. Maxwell expressed fears that the excerpt would undermine her criminal trial. A severe winter storm caused several fires in Texas, with power and water outages across the state, resulting in empty fire hydrants and broken water pipes. 3 children and their grandmother died in Sugar Land after using a fireplace to keep warm during the power outage. In San Antonio, an apartment building collapsed after 125 firefighters and 15 water tender trucks tried putting out a fire after realizing that the fire hydrants on the property did not contain water. A Killeen Holiday Inn was engulfed in flames after the hotel sprinkler system failed to work due to broken pipes. Let's welcome Thomas Nidgens to join us in discussion about today's top stories. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So Oxford's findings adds to the roster of potentially more alternative treatments to COVID symptoms. Now, Tom, you are a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine as well as acupuncture. So based on that background, what are your immediate reactions to Oxford's findings on budesonide?
Well, I think any of these studies, all the research and all the scientific work that's being done to kind of advance our understanding of potential treatments, they're all wonderful. I like them all. And the idea of finding, new uses for old medicine and proving it, with studies is crucial to the language that we speak these days, where nothing is really accepted until it has that body of evidence against, in support of it. But looking to the more traditional and the Chinese medicine sort of aspects, there is also a long history of potential ways to look at health as more of a holistic way that it does seem to get ignored somewhat by our current narrative.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. There seems to be quite a bit of contention around the topic of vaccines, and there seems to be a popular fixation on vaccines and Western medicine. So what is your opinion on perhaps experimenting with holistic herbal remedies to COVID symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of experimenting is, I guess, this is a scientific study. There are lots of already reviewed literature, going back to the topic of vitamin D that we covered over the summer. There's lots of supporting evidence to say that it does support your immune system for all types of respiratory infections as well as general health, right? So the idea of bolstering us as a whole system and looking at all the factors that go into our health, I think is an aspect of the narrative that's missing, right? So yeah, we have these vaccines and they are wonderful. They're apparently developing all sorts of great results, and people are developing the antibodies that are required. So that's great news to hear. But I also want to hear this other narrative to be pushed forward as well.
Very well said. And bottom line is, do your research, do your reading, do your due diligence before you do something that will affect your body for the long term. And thank you for bringing up our vitamin D study. You can read the full article and watch the entire episode on in24.ca with production code A0024. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us, Tom. Right now, we're going to check in with Christina, who has your local forecast.
Thanks, Vicky. Hey, everybody. Christina Laya along with you for your GTA today. But you know what? I've got much more weather for you than just Thursday, March the 4th in the Greater Toronto Area. I've got your Friday. I've got your weekend weather. Plus, I've got a prelude of things to come because the week ahead is going to start off gorgeous. You've got to stick around for that. And now let's get back into our Thursday. Our afternoon high of -2 degrees Celsius. You're seeing that mixture of sun and cloud as we head towards those midnight hours. You're going to start to see that cloud cover pick up. But this was the scene in the Greater Toronto Area as the beautiful sun was starting to rise. It was a cold morning. -16 is what it felt like with that wind chill because we've been dealing with a windy day. Winds really between 30 and 50 kilometers per hour. And as those evening hours start to reappear, you're going to need that quilt, so don't get rid of it just yet. Speaking of those colder conditions, I am going to show you the coldest spot in Ontario, Peewanak, minus 26.3 degrees Celsius. Aren't you happy if you're in the Greater Toronto Area, especially downtown, because we're actually trending above seasonal. Your hotspot for Ontario, well, it looks like it's Point Pelee, 0.4 degrees Celsius, just shy of that freezing mark. But another gorgeous region today actually was Hamilton, Ontario. I'm going to take you there, and I'm going to show you something really beautiful. Hamilton is known as the waterfall capital, get this, of not Canada, of the entire world. Do you guys want to know why? Because Hamilton has 130 waterfalls. For now, let's get into that Friday weather. March the 5th, plenty of sunshine, a high of minus 1 degree Celsius. It is going to get cooler towards those evening hours, minus 8 degrees Celsius. And now it's time for your weekend weather. Once again, we're sticking with these seasonal temperatures and trending a little bit of a seasonal as well. We should be really between minus 6 degrees Celsius and 3 degrees Celsius for this time of year. Plenty of sunshine, a little bit of cloud cover for your Saturday. Latter part of the weekend, more sunshine, a high of 1 degree Celsius. You guys know that spring equinox, it most definitely is on the way. March 20th is the day when we are going to say hello to spring in the northern hemisphere. Wondering when those clocks are going to spring 1 hour forward? I've got that info for you as well. That is the second Sunday of March. March 14th, we're all going to spring forward, but don't you worry, I'm going to have more details for you coming up next week. For now, as promised, I am giving you some beautiful sunshine because coming Monday, boy, are we going to be trending above seasonal. 8 degrees Celsius, plenty of sunshine, a low right at the freezing mark. Everybody, Monday is the day that you get out there and enjoy those beautiful conditions. Of course, you got to come on back next week. I'll have more details for you. Weather forecast in the Greater Toronto Area. But for now, here's Vicky with more of your news headlines.
Thank you, Christina. More stories are on the way, but first, let's take a short break. All the topics presented on today's Headline News episode can be found in the description below. Remember to download the MSMU UMO app to connect with our crew and follow us on social media for uninterrupted news. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Welcome back to In24 Headline News. I'm Thomas Snidgens, in the heart of it. Stay tuned for more discussions with Vicky after today's top stories. A member of the World Health Organization told Reuters that China did not provide key data that the investigative team needed in order to detect the origins of the virus. The WHO team visited parts of China, including Wuhan, last month to conduct an investigation into the virus. The team requested raw data on early COVID-19 cases dating back to December 2019, but only received a summary. JPS, the world's largest meat company, sourced its cattle from the Amazon. According to an inquiry conducted by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, JPS contributes to approximately 300 square kilometers of deforestation every year. JPS has denied these allegations and any responsibility. A 61-year-old man from Ottawa is facing 22 charges involving sexual assault against children. The case of Gerard Barriere came to light after the Ottawa Police Service Sexual Assault and Children Abuse Section launched an investigation in 2017 for incidents that happened between 1984 and 1990 and involved a young girl. The investigation led officers to other victims, including a girl under the age of 10. He is currently awaiting a court date and is in police custody. But investigators are worried that more children may have been involved. Anyone with information is urged to call Ottawa Police Services Unit. Canada wants Facebook to pay for the content it shares by Canadian publishers on its platform. Following Australia's example, the country is seeking allies to take on the tech giant. Canadian Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault proposed similar legislation. Guilbeault said he suspects there will soon be 10 to 15 countries adopting similar rules. Facebook's claims that the business gain from news is minimal, and that the news makes up less than 4% of the content people see in their news feed. Guilbeault claim that if the government does not intervene, Canada could lose 700 out of the 3,100 printed journalism jobs. Facebook responded to Australia's proposed legislation by blocking Australian news on its platform. The company has also been heavily censoring, blocking, and deleting anyone posting information deemed controversial to the greater narrative. Here at In24, we have had some articles experience restricted circulation on Facebook and other platforms due to the censorship. We are going to be discussing this topic in length with the wonderful Vicky.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Of course. So, our government is working to ensure that Facebook compensates publishers for, that publish on Facebook, publishers like ourselves.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, like you said, this will have tremendous implications on our domestic print journalism industry. So recently, earlier this month in February, Toronto Star published a newspaper that was entirely blank, making a very emphatic statement indeed about what our media landscape would look like if big tech continued to monopolize profits and therefore suck profits out of domestic journalism.
Indeed. And I guess on the other side of that coin, we have Facebook censorship. So this is where they're preventing people from disseminating their information or their messages, right? So I guess, again, this is something that we've experienced firsthand. We've definitely not been compensated, but we've also been hindered. So what are your thoughts on the balance between censorship and freedom of speech?
Absolutely. So this is a very delicate topic because, as you know, freedom of speech can be quite a controversial issue, especially when people misuse that topic to justify hate speech, especially on online platforms. So I do applaud social media platforms for taking responsibility to monitor and to regulate their content to ensure that there would not be perhaps hateful content or false information without proper fact-checking. But what we often witness on timelines when we scroll through Facebook, for example, we do encounter a lot of information that is not factually correct. So even with these purported regulations in place, how effective are they in sifting out the harmful or erroneous information?
Indeed, it seems that they're a bit slanted along certain narratives and maybe let other ones run a bit more willy-nilly, because when we're writing stories that may challenge the WHO's narrative or other information that we're getting from government bodies and that might lean more heavily towards like the idea of vaccines being a one-all the savior of the COVID virus. And even when we're talking about vitamin D, we can't talk about such things without having perhaps shadow bans and at the very least, these redirects taking us to the government websites that speak very little about all these other treatments. So.
Yeah, exactly. I would also like to add that if this proposed legislation is passed, this would set a precedence beyond the purview of just news media. You think about how on Facebook, for example, a lot of the times content is redistributed, reproduced, and even plagiarized without appropriate credit. So this would, of course, harm corporations, corporate media. However, when we think about the independent creators, independent artists, independent writers, for example, who don't have the same resources as corporate media and are entirely at the mercy of these community guidelines and Facebook's policies, who is left to stand up for them? How are they able to defend their own content and think about how to protect their rightful ownership of their content? So I really hope that if this legislation is passed, it would put a little bit pressure on Facebook to revisit their usage rights and how to enforce appropriate ownership of content.
So important because in one sense, artists do use these platforms to get their message out, and used correctly, they could really expand the reach that they have.
Yeah.
But if they're not getting compensated, what's it all for?
Exactly, just money into Mark Zuckerberg's pockets, I guess. Thank you for watching In24 Headline News. Remember to download the MSNU UMO app and visit in24.ca for our latest stories. Don't forget to follow In24 on social media to stay in the heart of it.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell to be the first to watch our latest episode. If you want to submit a story or connect with the MSMU team, you can find us all on MSMU Social Net Until next time, I'm Thomas Nijins.
And I'm Vicky A. Lee from Internet News. Thank you for joining us today.